Believe it or not, this is what sometimes a Melbourne summer looks like, but the purpose of today's video is not to talk about the weather. The purpose of today's video is to grab a coffee and sit down and have a chat about a particular topic in sports science. We haven't done a coffee thoughts in a little while, and I thought it was great given that I've been thinking about the concept over the last little while of just calories in, calories out, and how it applies to performance. And when you actually break it down, it's a really simple way of looking at things, because ultimately at the end of the day, we need some form of energy to be able to create or be able to produce and use energy. So that's what we're going to do. Grab yourself a coffee, let's sit down and chat through how your energy expenditure is really, really critical when it comes to working with endurance. All right, welcome back to another Coffee Thoughts episode. This one is all about energy in versus energy out, or ultimately just looking at energy expenditure and intake as a concept for what is a basic fundamental principle of physiology and ultimately performance. Because when it comes down to it, if you want to be able to create a particular output, let's say that's you want to go and run at 5-minute K pace for an hour, you want to be able to run 3:30 pace for a 2 or a 3-minute effort, or you want to try and ride 300 watts for 20 minutes, whatever it might be. These are just examples here. It requires a particular energy expenditure, or you will have a particular energy expenditure for that amount of work that you're trying to create or you have created. What it also requires is an energy intake to be able to take that up. That's why I've got the large latte going on today. I'm trying to cram in some extra calories because what I've actually noticed in the last little while is things like my metabolic rate has increased as I've increased through training as well. So all of these dynamic factors contribute to what is our exchange of energy in versus energy out. And it's really, really important to understand, because you need fundamentally the energy available in the first place to be able to create the outputs that you want. Like I said, if I want to be able to go out and do a particular training session, I know reasonably well what that energy expenditure is going to be like. Particularly for something like cycling. Like we take watts, for example, and even with the Stride power meters now, a watt is basically 1 joule per second. A joule is a measure of energy. So it's 1 unit of energy per second at a really simple level. We can start to estimate and have a look at, well, how much energy expenditure is required for this particular output we're trying to achieve. You can then try to look at how can we balance that out in terms of the energy intake to be able to get the optimal performance. Because a really key thing in endurance, and a thing that I see quite a lot, is athletes under fueling for what they need, not putting enough energy back in to be able to match what their output is. And ultimately it makes our sessions more difficult, makes it harder to recover, more susceptible to things like injury, illness, etc. All of that sort of snowballs as a byproduct. So this concept of energy in, energy out is really, really critical. Now, in terms of understanding how we can get the energy in, you can calculate pretty well what are we expending. You can have a look at your gas exchange. So if you get into a testing lab, chuck the mask on, you can have a look at what is happening from an energy expenditure perspective quite accurately and quite closely there. Most of your devices will estimate this and have a reasonable accuracy for the most part, but some of them can start to be a little bit out. And we're always playing a bit of an estimation game because so many factors will start to influence what the energy expenditure is like. You might be riding at the exact same power, but as the temperature and the ambient temperature outside heats up, or like it is today, cools down, that is going to determine a little bit of that added change to your energy expenditure. Hotter conditions, we generally burn through a bit more. So cooler conditions, we might actually be burning through a little bit less. So that's where it's going to change it a little bit dynamically when we're out in practice, on the road, training, etc. So to be able to then calculate what your energy in needs to be, we do have to estimate a little bit further, but also it's not just that simple. If I grab a banana, that banana I can look up and see what it is likely to be containing in terms of energy or amount of carbohydrate, but it's never going to be perfect because I don't have the nutritional information of a fresh banana. Some food sources will have that information for you, but not all of them will. So this becomes a bit of a tricky balance of, well, how do we get pretty close? And I guess the idea is we need to just kind of get close enough. We need to be calculating as best we can and estimating as best we can to be ideally as close as possible. The other thing we have to consider though is not everything we put in directly translates to what we output. And the reason for that is because the body's not 100% efficient. And I guess what I'm meaning by that is that the energy that we put in, so say I eat, if I take on a gel or if I eat a banana or I eat something that has a high amount of carbohydrate to keep things simple, and I'm trying to get that carbohydrate in to be able to use it for my high intensity interval session, whatever it might be, not all of that carbohydrate that I ingest and take in as energy in is actually going to make it to usable ATP or usable energy to be able to power the run or the ride that I'm trying to do. We actually only get about 30% of what came in. So we're not very efficient at all. And the efficiency side of things is something that ultimately we can't really change too much. Whenever there's an exchange of energy from one source to another, so think about it as food as a source of energy, translating into me trying to turn the pedals and power the bike as a different type of energy, there is going to be a loss somewhere, and largely that is lost as heat, which is why in most circumstances we start to see ourselves warm up as we start to increase intensity, start to change more fuel and burn more fuel to create more energy, start to heat up because heat's a byproduct. So not all of it is going to be this perfect match, and you can see where this starts to become a little bit more complicated process than just purely like, what am I putting in, what am I expending, those should equal out. In theory it sounds quite simple. In practice it can actually be a little bit more difficult than that. What I really want to get at here with this whole energy in, energy out is looking at your training and performance from this more philosophical, bigger picture perspective when it comes to this, rather than being really refined and going, oh, let's try and calculate to the exact calorie or the exact kilojoule, exactly what I need to put out, or what I'm putting out to match what I'm putting in, vice versa. It's more of an understanding of everything requires an energy expenditure. So even if it's a basic level of, gee, I've got a really hard, high intense, long interval session today, I probably need to be taking in a little bit more fuel prior to that to prepare for it. And this is something that is actually starting to happen in practice at the high end in terms of elite performance, is you're starting to see athletes in sessions where they previously may not have actually fueled up, something like a zone 2 run. They've done a couple of training sessions for the day, do a zone 2 run in the afternoon, but then we've got a hard intensity bike session tomorrow. Let's fuel up during that easy zone 2. So maybe let's take a gel when we might not normally. Not to try and power that immediate effect. We're not looking at the here and now, the present. We're looking at future-proofing ourselves against not having the available carbohydrates or the available calories we need to be able to get into the next one. So it's topping up and thinking about, what do I need now? Of course, that's important. But also, what do I need in the next session today? Or if we're doing double sessions, or what do I need in the session tomorrow? And thinking ahead to make sure that we have enough energy available so we're not constantly just depleting, which can be problematic. Depleting ourselves significantly over a period of time and not being able to replenish, leaving ourselves in a bit of a deficit, might lead to things like some unnecessary weight loss if you're not looking at deliberately trying to drop some weight. But also at the same time, if we're not getting all the nutrients and the good stuff back in, along with the carbohydrates and the fats that we're going to be able to use to power our movements, that leaves us susceptible to things like illness. It leaves us susceptible to things like injury, in particular things like bone injury. Got a bucket load of calcium in this latte with the milk going on in there. But something like that, really simply, is like making sure I'm getting enough of those nutrients in and calories in total is going to help from a performance aspect, but prevent it against the stuff that we don't necessarily want to see as well. So that's just a little bit of a ramble and a thought process around energy in, energy out. Have you even considered, let me know in the comments down below, have you even considered this whole energy expenditure side of things when it comes to your performance? Or have you just sort of skimmed over it and gone, I think I eat enough so I'll be able to train quite aggressively and do what I need to? Or if you really start to refine it and understand, well, certain types of activities are going to require me to fuel up less or more, and when is more appropriate to be able to optimize it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Always happy to hear them. Really, I think it's an interesting point, and it's not something relatively new. I'm not trying to put out a thought that's reinventing the wheel here. This is just fundamental basics, but as I said, it's not as simplistic as it can look. So it is one of these things that we do need to work through the process, and everyone is slightly individual when it comes to their exact efficiencies of things, and then their exact intake versus output. So many factors play into this, so it's not a one size fits all, but at the end of the day, it is a really critical part of making sure we can perform at our best. So hopefully you enjoyed another Coffee Thoughts episode. I'm going to finish off this coffee and stay out of the rain today, but hopefully you enjoy more of these videos coming up here on the channel. Let me know any other ideas or topics that we can maybe cover in a Coffee Thoughts episode. I'm going to leave it there for today, and we'll catch you in the next one.